The bread was already rising. I had been up since 4 in the morning, the kitchen warm, the smell of anise and cardamom settling into the walls. The way it only does in December, the table set with the good dishes my mother had wrapped in linen and passed to me the morning I married. 8 chairs, pulled from their places along the wall, and set in a row, straight as I could make them. The good candles, not the everyday ones. The pine bough I had cut from the tree at the edge of our pasture, laid along the center of the table, the needles still dark and sharp-smelling from the cold. I remember standing at the window when I heard the buggy come up the lane. The horse's breath made small clouds in the pale morning air. I watched the wheels slow on the frozen gravel. I listened to the voices that came through the cold. Her voice first, the way it always was, cutting through the others, the way a larger stone cuts water. And I knew, before my door opened, before the boots came over my threshold, before the voices filled my kitchen. I knew that Christmas had just arrived, and I was no longer the one holding it. I was 31 years old. It was the second Christmas of 18. My name is Anna. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I am 79 years old now. This channel, Anna the Amish Grandmother, is where I finally say the things I spent a lifetime being taught to carry in silence. If any part of what I share here reaches you, reaches something you have been holding for a long time without a name for it, I hope you will stay. Subscribe if you have not already. Leave me a comment and tell me where you are writing from. I read every one. Now let me tell you about Miriam. In the old order world I was raised in, there is a hierarchy inside every household that no one writes down and no one needs to. The husband leads. But before the husband in practice, in the daily weight of a home, there is his mother, and the mother's place at the center of her son's life does not simply end when he takes a wife. It rearranges itself. It folds quietly into the new arrangement, like a woman who has simply moved from one room to the one adjoining, and waits. Miriam was Samuel's mother. She had raised 8 children on a farm 12 miles from ours, buried one, and outlasted a husband who died before I ever met her. By the time Samuel and I married, she was in her mid-50s, large in the way of women who have worked hard their whole lives, certain in the way of women who have never had reason not to be. She had a laugh that you heard before you heard anything else, and hands that could do almost anything without asking how. She knew how to run a household. She knew how to run a Christmas. She had done it for 30 years before I ever had a kitchen of my own. What I did not understand when Samuel and I married was that her Christmas did not retire when mine began. Amish Christmas is not a loud holiday. We did not have the decorations the English world uses. No lights on the house, no tree dragged inside from the cold. What we had was food and family, and the particular warmth of a house that has been made ready. The cooking began days before. The visiting lasted days after. And at the center of all of it, always at the center, was the woman who had held the family together through every hard year and every ordinary one. In my community, that woman did not step aside simply because a son had grown and married. She moved, but she did not step aside. In the Amish families I knew, and this was especially true in the older, more conservative communities of my district, the elder woman's traditions did not make room when her son took a wife. She carried them into the new house the way you carry good furniture, carefully, with the assumption that they belong wherever she places them, the way the bread was risen and with what. The order the family sat at the table, the particular songs chosen for Christmas morning, the ones her mother had sung and her mother's mother before that, the way the kuchen was decorated, always the dried fruit, never the sugar glaze. These were not preferences. They were the shape of the family itself, and they had been her shape for 30 years. A young wife, new to the house and the life, was expected to learn them, to fold herself into them, and then quietly to disappear inside them. I learned them. That was not the difficult part. The difficult part was the disappearing. The first Christmas I told myself it was grief. Miriam had buried her husband only 2 years before. I understood grief. I stepped back from the stove and handed her the spoon without being asked. I moved the bread I had risen since 4 a.m. to a smaller plate near the edge of the table, because she had brought her kuchen, and the kuchen needed the center. I said nothing about the dishes, though they were mine, though my mother had wrapped them in linen herself. The second Christmas, I told myself it was habit, that she had not quite noticed, or had not meant it. Old women and their habits. I would be patient. By the third, I understood it was neither grief nor habit. It was arrangement, the kind no one makes openly and no one needs to discuss, because discussing it would mean naming it, and naming it would mean I wanted something. And in the world I lived in, a young wife who wanted something she had not been given was already asking for too much. So I did not name it, I did not ask. I learned instead to arrive in my own kitchen early. Enough that the bread was done before the buggy reached the lane. I learned to set the table the way I wanted it, and then stand near the window, not hovering, not in anyone's path, so that when Miriam walked in and began to adjust what I had laid out, I was already out of her way. I learned where the margins of my own Christmas were, and I worked inside them without complaint. I handed my children small things in the quiet moments. A stolen piece of the anise bread, a whispered word about the pine bough, the particular way I pressed their hands when I passed them. In the moments between Miriam's back being turned and her eyes coming back to the room, invisible mothering, done in the margins, every Christmas for 18 years. My daughter Ruth was for the first time it happened. She was 21 and married herself before it stopped. I will not tell you every one of those 18 Christmases, because they are too similar to tell one by one without a heaviness that would wear us both down. But there are a few I need to tell you. There was the Christmas when I was 35, and Ruth came to me in the kitchen before anyone arrived, still in her nightgown, her good apron tied over it in her small 8-year-old way, and asked if she could help, if I would teach her to make the bread the way I made it. We had less than an hour. Miriam arrived earlier than usual that year, And when the door opened, Ruth looked at me and I looked at her. And without a word between us, the lesson was over. I was at the window. Ruth was carrying plates for her grandmother. I washed the bowl alone later and did not cry. There was the Christmas when I was 42, and my son Daniel, 15 by then, already taller than Samuel, pulled me aside after supper and asked me quietly, so only I could hear, "Ma'am, do you not like your own cooking?" He had been watching for years. He asked it the way boys that age ask things they suspect are heavier than the answer they will get. I told him his grandmother was the elder woman, and that was simply how things were, and that I was fine. He looked at me for a long moment, the look of a young person who knows they have been handed the small version of a large thing. Then he nodded and went back to the others. There was the Christmas when I was 46, and I went out to the barn after supper. I told Samuel I was checking on the animals. The cold that December was the deep kind that sits in the straw and the wood and the air all at once, that gets into your hands even through your coat. I stood there and I let myself feel the whole of it. The bread at the edge of the table. Ruth asking Miriam, not me, how to get the caramel to set properly. The 8 chairs I had pulled from the wall and straightened in the dark at 4 a.m, put back slightly crooked by the end of the day, by hands that had simply never learned where I kept things. I stood in that barn a long time. The horses shifted. The wind pressed against the boards. Then I went back inside and washed the dishes. Let me set this aside for a moment before I take you any further into it. If you are still here, if you have come this far, then I think I already know something about you. I think you know what it is to stand in the margins of your own life, to be the woman who set the table and then moved back from it, who did the work before anyone arrived and the cleaning after everyone left, and who was so far inside the arrangement that she had stopped noticing it had a shape, or that she had one too, before it all began. What I learned in the years after, the way I came back to myself slowly and with more stumbles than I expected. I wrote it all down. 4 weeks, the way I lived them, the path I walked back to a life that felt like mine. I called it The Years That Are Still Yours. It is a small book, a quiet companion, and I wrote it the way I would have wanted someone to write it for me. When I was 46 years old, standing in a cold barn, with the whole weight of 18 Christmases, and then going back inside to wash the dishes alone. The link is in the first com of this video, if any of what I just said belongs to you. Now, back to where we were. Miriam got sick in the winter that I was 48. Her lungs, the doctor said. She had always been the kind of strong that does not suggest illness, the kind of presence that makes the body's eventual weakness feel like a mistake. And so the sickness moved quickly into the space her strength had kept clear. By late autumn, she could not travel. Samuel went to her. I sent food with him. For the first time in 18 years, Christmas came, and the buggy did not come up the lane. I will tell you something that shamed me for a long time afterward. My first feeling, standing at that window on Christmas morning, was relief, not joy. Not the satisfaction of having finally won something. just relief, the quiet opening of a space I had held myself small against for so long that I had nearly forgotten the space was there. The bread at the center of the table, the good dishes out, the pine bough where I had always wanted it, which was where I had put it. My daughter Ruth beside me in the kitchen, her good apron tied on, asking me how to get the caramel to set properly. I cried when she asked me that. I told her it was the steam getting in my eyes. She was 21 years old, and she knew I was lying. And she put her arm around me anyway and said nothing, which was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in a very long time. Miriam died in February, when the ground was still frozen, and the fields were still the color of old linen. The week before she died, Samuel took me to visit her. She was in the back bedroom of her youngest daughter's house, in a narrow bed by the window, and she had gotten small in the way the very sick get small, not in height, but in the sense of her, the large, certain presence folded down to something that fit in a room that size. Her hands on the quilt were the first thing I noticed. I had watched those hands for 18 years, capable hands, certain hands. They lay still on the quilt now, quiet in a way I had never seen them quiet. She looked at me for a long moment when I came in. Then she said, "Send Samuel out." Samuel went. I sat down in the chair beside the bed. The room was quiet, the particular quiet of a sick room in winter, when even the sounds outside feel like they are being careful. A crow called once from somewhere in the yard and then was still. Then Miriam said, "I saw you all those years. I want you to know that I saw you." I did not know what to say to that. I said nothing. "I saw you at the window," she said. "Every Christmas when we came up the lane, I saw you step back from the stove. I saw the bread you moved to the edge of the table." She stopped. Her breathing was slow and deliberate now, each breath a thing considered. I told myself it was for the family, that all of it was for the family, for the children, for Samuel, for keeping the way things had always been. A pause. The crow was still outside. Miriam's hands lay quiet on the quilt, but it was for me. I could not let go of it. I could not let go of any of it. I want you to understand that I know that now. I sat with what she had said. The quilt under her hands was one she had made herself years before. I recognized the pattern, the colors she had always favored, greens and deep blues. She had given one just like it to Ruth at her wedding. "I gave the best years I had to holding on," she said finally. "I called it faithfulness. I believe now it was fear. Fear of what I was without the holding." She looked at me then, and her eyes had the clarity that sometimes comes when there is not much time left to cloud things with anything that does not matter. "The years ahead of you are still yours, Anna. Whatever years are still in front of you, do not give them away the way I gave mine. There is nothing waiting for you on the other side of all that, giving that you could not have had here if you had only let yourself have it." She closed her eyes. I sat with her for another hour. She did not speak again that day. She died 6 days later, on a Tuesday morning, before it was fully light. I have turned those words over in my hands for 30 years, not always with peace. I will not tell you the peace came all at once, or that I did not spend years feeling the loss in them before I felt anything else. 18 years at the window, Ruth asking Miriam, not me. Daniel at 15, with his careful, quiet question that he deserved a better answer to. But I have thought also about it cost Miriam to say what she said. A woman who had never once, in all the years I knew her, named a wrong she had done. To call it plainly by its name, in a room that small, in the time she had left. That was not a small thing. That was for a woman like Miriam, a very large thing. I understand that now, in a way, I could not have understood it at 48. And I have thought many times about what she named without quite naming it. The slow giving away of the self. Year by year, arrangement by arrangement, in the name of something that was called love, but was built more from fear than she ever let herself see. She had organized her whole life around being at the center of her son's world. And she had held that place for so long she had forgotten that holding was a choice, that it came at a cost, and that the cost was paid by a young woman standing at a window every Christmas for 18 years. I do not know if I have forgiven her fully. I think forgiveness for some things is not a door you walk through once and find yourself on the other side of. It is more like a field you keep crossing, and some years the ground is easier than others. Some Decembers I think of Miriam and feel the loss first. Some I think of what she said and feel something closer to tenderness. I think both can be true of the same person. I think she knew both could be true of her. We are taught, women in the world I came from, that to yield is faithfulness, that to step back from the stove and move your bread to the edge of the table and say nothing is the same thing as love. What we are not taught, what no one teaches, not in that world, not in most worlds, is to ask whether the yielding was ever chosen. Whether there was ever a moment when a door stood open and we simply were never told it was a door. Miriam asked that question late, at great cost and with very little time. She answered it plainly, and then she handed the answer to me. That is the most honest thing anyone has ever given me. I have tried to be worthy of it. If you recognize the shape of this story, not because it was Amish, not because it was a mother-in-law, not because it was Christmas, but because the shape itself is familiar, the window, the bread at the edge, the work done in the margins of the day, while the arrangement ran its course around you. If you have spent years on the margin of your own life and told yourself it was faithfulness, it was love, it was simply how things were, I see you. If someone at the very end of their own time handed you back a piece of yourself you had stopped looking for, I see you. If you stood in a cold barn in December and felt the full weight of something, and then went back inside and washed the dishes, because that was all there was to do, I see you too. You were not wrong to give. You were not wrong to love them and feed them and set the table before they arrived. You were working inside the only arrangement that had ever been made available to you. But the years still in front of you, those have not been given away yet. Miriam said it plainly. She said it at the only moment she could, and she said it clearly. And I think she said it for both of them. I am carrying it forward, and now I am handing it to you. If this story reached something in you, leave me a comment. Tell me what it touched. And if you want to keep hearing the truth from behind the prayer cap and the long years after it, subscribe to Anna, the Amish grandmother. There is still so much I have not said. To whoever stayed with me all the way through this, thank you. There are women near my own age walking through the years that are still yours right now. One of them wrote to me that she had chosen her own supper for the first time in 40 years. And she told me as though it were a great thing. It was. The link is in the first comment of this video, if you would like to be one of them. And that is the whole of it. Until next time, the years still in front of you are not borrowed. They were always yours to spend.